All right, guys. Hey, pay attention here. So, like I said, current events, we'll have that on Thursday. Well, I know it's not Friday, but I won't be here Friday. Anyway, real quick. So yesterday we talked briefly a little bit about the start of the age of exploration, the age of discovery. Okay. And we're going to move forward and talk about Spain more today. Right. There's a lot with Spain, so this is going to continue on probably, well, maybe even until Thursday. We'll see. But there's a lot to talk about. Real quick, I do have an assignment here for you. Yeah, so you guys are gonna be working with a partner and you're gonna detail about a famous explorer, right? And I want to see their path, where they went, significance of it, importance of their exploration, if they conquered new land, what type of trade routes they had access to, who they sailed for, maybe they're actually from a different country, who knows? But anyway, that's what I want you guys to focus on here on in your spare time, right? So in your spare time, please work on this project. I'm thinking next Tuesday here. So you got a whole week here when it comes to creating a presentation. Anyway, so here's the assignment. I just posted it now. And let me run through it real quick with you. So once you click on the assignment, I'll talk about this link to the discussion post. That's where you're going to submit who you want to research. And if you're working with someone else, put their name too. So I put an example here, which I'll show you here shortly. But real quick, here's the assignment. So you can use whatever app you'd like. So you can use iMovie, Canva, Google Slides, Book Creator, whatever, right? It's really open to anything. Prezi, I don't care, right? Whatever program, whatever app you like to use when it comes to presenting this information. All right, but real quick, the objectives, I want you to understand the explorers' accomplishments, okay? So who they sailed for, maybe, again, they're not even from that country, but maybe they set sail from a joint stock company of that country. I want you to explain the significance of the exploration. So maybe establish new colonies, I don't know, maybe, right, in the New World. Maybe establish new trade routes, okay, that help enrich whatever crown or whatever country that they sailed for. Also, when it comes to some of these explorers, right, maybe they're conquistadors, these conquerors, maybe they took over large chunks of land and eventually colonized it in the new world, right? So again, it depends. It might be a little bit different depending on who you're researching. Again, I want a visual representation. So if you're using iMovie, you're using Canva, Google Slides, put pictures in, show the travel route. That's the whole point of it. I want to see exactly, and everybody else to see exactly where these explorers traveled. Interesting facts. So what about the voyage, right? Did everybody make it back? I don't know. How many ships did they take? And a lot of them were using caravels, which we'll talk more about today. Dangers, right? What kind of dangers did they run into? Maybe you're talking about, I don't know, Magellan and how he explores the first explorer to circumnavigate the world. Well, his crew was, right? He didn't make it, which we'll talk more about. But anyway, that's what I'm looking for. And again, you can use whatever presentation program or app you would like to do so. All right, here's the list. It looks a lot like the list that I put on the slides, okay? But here's the list I was looking for. So again, once you choose someone, right, first come, first serve. If someone's already chosen, you got to find someone else. All right, and then, like I said, you'll pick whatever explorer you like to choose here from, and then put that in the discussion post along with who you're working with. If there is an off chance we get a group of three, just let me know. Let me know. I don't typically like that, but if that's the case, sure. All right, I'm gonna have a self-grading rubric too then. So I know a lot of times with group projects, one person might do the whole thing, and others just might kind of sit around and do nothing. So I want to make sure I put that out there for you. I'll put that out probably closer to, towards presentations next week. Anyway, that's what I'm looking for. Is there any questions right now? Obviously, sources, MLA. So if you're doing it on Google Slides, just create a separate slide for it. Or on Canva, I don't know, find a space or a place or maybe another page that you can add, or you can put your citations. All right, okay. Here's the rubric then. So I posted it here. You guys can read through that on your own. All right, so real quick, as you're, I don't know, maybe thinking about an explorer that you want to research, which we'll talk about a lot of these explorers, maybe not all of them, So I think it's important for this project to maybe touch upon all of them here so that we have an idea where they explored. All right, then here's a discussion post. I have that linked. So all you got to do is just reply. Okay, so I just put an example there. I guess I should have put it in bold, but the example I put, okay, Christopher Columbus, Ms. O'Neill, right? That's who I'm working with. So all you got to do is put the Explorer and then whoever you're working with. Okay, so again, first come, first serve, whoever replies, and let's say it picks that Explorer, you got to find someone new. I just don't want to say Explorer being researched over and over and over again. All right, is there any questions on that? All right, here, real quick. So the bit new thing here, I get it with research, books, sure, whatever, articles, that's awesome. Right, but also podcasts. So podcasts are kind of taking the world by storm now when it comes to gathering information. And there's a list of resources here under each episode of each podcast. Right, here's one that I listen to a lot. And well, they're all G-rated, PG-13 maybe, right? But there might be a discrepancy that might be, a disclaimer in the beginning of a podcast that might talk a little bit about some of the violence maybe that was discussed or talked about. But for the most part, it's really good. Anyway, the Explorer podcast, I posted this here to the page of the module. So once you go to modules here, chapter 2, Renaissance, Reformation, First Global Age, right? You click on it, go to the very bottom, you'll see Explorers podcast. Once you click on it, it will take you right to the homepage. And there's just so many podcasts here about these explorers. So I don't know if you're interested and you maybe find a podcast here of one of these explorers. All right, look into it. And there's a list of resources attached to each podcast that you can dive into a little bit more in detail. But this is good. Again, you just listen to it and it details quite a bit of information about these explorers. So depending on the Explorer, there might be a lot to it, a lot of information. So there might be multiple parts. All right, is there any questions? All right, I just wanted to show you guys that because I thought that was interesting and something, again, you guys might be interested in to further the content. There you go. All right, so here's your bell ringer for today. Let's get to it. Just wanted to discuss that with you guys. All right, so I know yesterday we kind of rushed into it, but explain the three G's, motives that started the age of exploration. We talked about this yesterday, actually on the first slide of the presentation. There you go. I'll be checking that discussion post then. So hopefully you guys are looking into it and getting a good head start on it. I'd like to see everybody post in the discussion post. But if you're working with a partner, the person, let's say your partner already selected who you're researching and put your name, you don't have to do it then. Right? Just one person per group has to put a discussion. You just gotta obviously indicate who you're working with. But I'd like to see everybody post into it, maybe by tomorrow. That'd be great. That's like your homework assignment. How about that? Just make sure you post it for tomorrow. When you're listing the three Gs here, try to put a little bit of detail in here. Maybe you know a little bit about these forms of exploration and discovery. So maybe get in detail a bit of examples about the three Gs. Bless you. All right, here we go. Three G's. What do we got? Three G's. Give me one of them. Chloe, go ahead. God. Yeah, good job. So with this age of discovery and this topic here in this chapter, again, I know a lot of these topics are overlapping, right? I know in chapter one, we're kind of overlapping into chapter two, and we'll overlap into chapter three here. There's a lot going on at this time. Anyway, God, good. So explain that a little bit for me, though. God, why God for this age of discovery? Why? Like, they wanted to spread Christianity. Yeah, good job, right? So we just got done with the Reformation, right? Yeah, so there's a lot of these different, a lot of different forms of Christianity, perspectives of Christianity forming here in Europe, right? Stemming from Martin Luther, yeah, sure. England obviously broke away from the Catholic Church too. Calvinism, Zwingli creating his own form of Christianity. The Catholic Church going through its own reform, man, oh man, right? So you got to imagine Europe's just all over the place. One thing I want to mention too is that one of the middlemen, so to speak, of Europe is the Ottoman Empire, right? So this is Muslim groups, mostly Islamic. So you can imagine a lot of these Christian perspectives here, a lot of these nations here that embrace Christianity are threatened, worried of the Ottoman Empire approaching into Europe. So with that being said, the goal here is to try to spread Christianity, try to convert as many people as possible to the faith. Right, the Catholic Church is doing this, especially the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, what we talked about last topic. But we'll even mention, yeah, the Mayflower, sure, I guess for more religious freedom. But here in England, right, these Puritans will leave this chaotic place here and try to find a new place to settle, right? So when it comes to religion, yeah, it's a big part of this exploration. A lot of people are trying to find this religious freedom, try to find a new place where they can embrace a new culture, a new community. So yeah, God's a big part of it. Good. So like I mentioned, when it comes to these explorers, they're going to Africa, they're going to Asia, they're going to the New World, right? To establish these new places where maybe they can express their religion freely. All right, good. So God definitely one of them. Good. What else? Naomi, what's another one?
Gold.
Gold, yeah, good job, right? So, yeah, we talked about it here at the start of the topic with the commercial revolution. Italy, I know it's not Italy just yet, but these Italian-speaking states are controlling trade, right? The Ottoman Empire now, man, are they controlling trade? So the goal here for a lot of these countries here out in Western Europe and Central Europe, their goal is to try to expand. Their goal is to try to find new trade routes, establish firm trade routes into Asia, the Asian markets, and yeah, eventually the New World. So with that, that is going to bring a lot of resources, a lot of materials, a lot of foods that you can't really find here in Europe. And overall, that's going to enhance and embrace new wealth for these European countries. And yeah, so with wealth comes, we talk about a lot. Okay, well, with wealth comes what? Naomi?
Glory.
Glory, okay, we'll get to glory here soon, but with what, Jason?
Power.
Power, right? Good job, power. So a lot of these countries here in Europe will embrace a new sense of power from this age of exploration, right? They're cutting out the middleman, like we talked about yesterday. So again, Italy, the Ottoman Empire, they're controlling the Mediterranean Sea, as you can see, right? All right, last one. Go ahead, Naomi. So, glory, yeah, good job. So a lot of these explorers, these countries want to try to establish new colonies, find new trade routes, and pride themselves over it. Okay. So think about it. And a lot of you guys, whenever you're competing in sports or I don't know, just even completing an essay question, the whole goal here is to make sure that yours is the example, right, Chase? Yeah, okay, all right. So when it comes to this glory, this pride, these explorers are looking for it too, right? They want to be the ones that are going to be written about in these history books moving forward. They want to be the ones that find these new lands or, I don't know, trade routes to Asia. So glory is definitely one of these other factors, these other motives for this European expansion. All right, today we're going to focus more on Spain. I do need to talk a little bit more about Portugal. So I'm going to talk about Portugal, go to the vocab for today, and then move on to Spain. Does that work? All right, so I know I got cut off short yesterday. Anyway, remember 3 G's, the motives, right, for the age of exploration. Make sure you remember it. I see some people already putting in discussion posts. Good job. Good job. What I like to see, again, once one of these explorers are chosen, you gotta move on. All right, okay, so we ended up talking about the Monument of Discoveries. Okay, so you can kind of see the front part of it here, right, on the slide before. Anyway, the Age of Discovery, where does it start? What country decides, you know what, let's do something different? You know what, let's try to find new lands. Let's try to find new trade routes. What country? Elena, go ahead. Portugal, yeah. So why Portugal? Let's look at it on the map here. So if you guys are looking at the map in the front, Portugal's way out here, as far west as you can get in Europe. All right, they're right up against the Atlantic Ocean. Let's face it, so any type of trade that has been traveling, let's say by land or by the Mediterranean. So the Ottoman Empire obviously controls the land route. Italy, yeah, I know it's not Italy yet, but they control the trade through the Mediterranean Sea. Who's the last country that's probably going to get these resources, these materials, these goods? Portugal, they're way out here, right? So that travel is going to take some time for sure, right? And let's face it, if it's type of food or spice or any type of, edible, I don't know what it might be, right? This is going to, I don't know, spoil over time. And let's face it, Portugal is going to get the scraps because these countries here in Europe are going to take all the good items. So at the time that Portugal is going to get access to any of these resources, these goods from Asia, well, it's going to be diminished. Going to be pretty much what's left over. And they're paying a high price. So they're the ones that decide, you know what, we're done, right? We're going to move forward. We're going to try to find a new path. Anyway, so that's what we kind of talked about yesterday. There is a cool monument here where a lot of these explorers set sail in southern Portugal. And this is called the Monument of Discoveries. So in the front, the forefront is Henry the Navigator, and Prince Henry the Navigator, who I talked maybe a little bit about yesterday. I'll talk more about today. Even though he wasn't much of an explorer, he decided to bring these instruments of travel, especially when it comes to navigating the open waters, to Portugal to teach these explorers, to help train them when it comes to traveling these open waters. All right, so Vasco da Gama, Diaz, we'll talk about them here today. All right, here's a better look at it. So obviously Christianity, God, right? That God aspect here, the factor God here, the three G's, that is definitely going to be one of the biggest motives for this exploration. Right, with Portugal, they're heavily Catholic, right? So when it comes to this Catholic faith, they're going to try to, again, spread Catholicism around the world when they're, establishing these trade routes. So I think that's interesting. They built this right around the start of World War II, maybe even a little bit before it. All right, so anyway, Henry the Navigator. So Henry the Navigator, he's famed for bringing a lot of these instruments, this form of education that the Ottomans were using for a long time out in the Mediterranean Sea. Even the Italians, right? Even though they're not Italy yet. But anyway, this area here, the Mediterranean Sea, was focused with a lot of this travel, these new instruments, and, well, education, right, of how to navigate the open waters. Yeah, the Mediterranean Sea, a little bit different than, let's say, the Atlantic Ocean. I get that. But for Portugal, they're going to take baby steps, right? They're going to try to reestablish and affirm these trade routes around Africa. But anyway, what did he do? Even though he didn't really explore himself, even though he didn't really go on these, long distance trips, right? He was one who's invoking these ideas that, again, the Ottomans were using, and again, the Italians here in the Mediterranean Sea for a long period of time. So we got to take this idea, this education, this schooling, and bring it to Portugal. And that's exactly what he does. So he supported the exploration. He also sponsored many of these voyages as this school, as this kind of university here was forming in Portugal. So what they do? Well, they applied these instruments, like I mentioned, that the Ottomans were using for quite a bit of time. Right, as they were navigating the Mediterranean Sea, we thought, well, how about we bring the sextant, the astrolabe here, and apply it to these explorers here in Portugal, that we can maybe navigate the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. Well, how do they work? So a lot of it's based off the constellations, right? They're looking at stars, even the sun, and comparing it to the horizon to understand their specific latitude, right? To understand their correct location out in the open water. Again, it's not like there's road signs out there, right? Especially way out in the ocean. It's not like there is GPS. I don't like GPS. That's not a thing. So they got to use the tools that's given to them. So the sextant, especially, there's a telescope built onto it that allows you to look at the horizon line, and compare it to where the sun is. And that will detail, for the most part, pretty accurate actually, of what latitude you're at, right? Where you're at located in the specific area out in the water. So map making, were they accurate back then? Not the greatest, but at this time, we start to see maps becoming very, very accurate, right? It's kind of amazing actually how accurate they were way back when. Again, it's not like they had satellite imaging like we do today, but they're utilizing the means of constellations, they're using astronomy to explain exactly where they're at. So it's pretty amazing, pretty amazing. Also, one thing I want to mention is a caravel. So this is a new type of ship that's using sails, right? It's lightweight, it's fast moving, and well, a lot of times it would be used, especially here in the Mediterranean Sea, right? Also, the caravel is going to be used along the coast of Africa, as Portugal is definitely going to be traveling around these coasts. So yeah, you're utilizing a new means of propelling yourself with a caravel with wind. So pretty amazing, right? To think about how these explorers just decided, well, let's just set sail. Whatever we find, we find. Whatever we stumble upon, we do. So you can imagine how brave they are, right? So a lot of people relate, especially with current events here moving forward. Yeah, late Maddie. How a lot of these new expeditions here out in space, SpaceX, what they're doing is kind of amazing. All right, anyway, so Portugal, their goal is to try to reach Asia, right? So the main thing, again, cut out the middleman, right? Cut out the Ottoman Empire, cut out Italy, right? You're dependent on them too much for trade. And as they're becoming so stinking rich, well, the goal for Portugal is to do the same thing. The only way they can do that is finding these trade routes. So the goal here is to try to establish a new trade route, and that's what they're going to do. So rather than focusing on the Mediterranean Sea, which let's face it, they really don't have access to it, right? They're going to try to sail out the Atlantic. They're going to sail around Africa, right? So again, the idea here is to try to take some baby steps. So for Prince Henry the Navigator, he helped sponsor a lot of these voyages here that just rounded the western coast of Africa, right? Just getting down as far as you can, making your way back, getting down as far as you can, a little bit further, and making your way back. And then eventually you'll get to these explorers like Bartholomew Diaz, who rounded the very bottom, right, the southern tip of Africa. And he makes his way up to the eastern coast of Africa. So obviously this is getting a little bit further, right? This is getting a little bit more sophisticated when it comes to this travel. Right, so Bartholomew Diaz is famous for rounding the southern tip of Africa. And the whole way, you got to imagine, yes, they're setting up trade points. They're setting up means of trade ports so that whoever travels there, well, they got to pay up, right? Let's face it, early on here in the age of discovery, a lot of these ships, they're not going to venture too far out the Atlantic Ocean. Not yet, anyway. It's going to come soon enough. But with Diaz, right, again, he's famed for rounding that southern tip of Africa, making it up the East Coast. And then, well, that sets the stage for Vasco da Gama. What a cool name, huh? Vasco da Gama. Anyway, Vasco da Gama, he makes it all the way to India. So he utilizes the same travel route as Bartholomew Diaz. And he decides, you know what? Well, the whole idea here is to get to Asia, right? The whole idea here is to get to India, so to speak, right? So you got to keep it going. So he makes his way up the Indian Ocean and eventually makes his way to India and establishing trade routes, right? Establishing this new route here to Asia. And let's face it, right? Cutting out the middleman. Perfect. Awesome. No longer do you have to rely on the Ottoman Empire that has a totally different faith than you, right? And then Italy, same thing, right? So they've been really prospering off this trade for some time now. So Portugal now finding this new trade route to Asia, well, look out. One nice thing too is that, let's face it, with these ships, these boats, you can pack a lot of goods, a lot of materials on it, right? A ton of them. So that's going to be helpful when it comes to getting a lot of these resources like spices that you can't find in Europe back to Portugal, back to Europe. So it's a lot more efficient, it's a lot faster even, and you can bring a lot more of these goods and products and resources back to Portugal, right? Back to Europe. So now all of a sudden, Portugal has a higher supply of these goods that they never really had before, right? Thanks to shipping. All right, so like I mentioned, land trade can be very expensive, right? It takes a long time here to try to establish these trade routes. And let's face it, you're limited to what you can actually carry. You're limited to what you actually can pull along, let's say, with a large portion cart, right? Now you can load these ships up with as many of the goods and resources as possible. So it does make it cheaper, right? It does make it cheaper. So overall, right, these countries here in Europe, especially Western Europe, are starting to see this and say, you know what, why don't we try to find a new route? Why don't we try to establish a new means of trade? Right? Portugal is moving in a positive direction here. All right, anyway, so like I mentioned, the Spice Islands, that is a key area. That is a place where a lot of these European countries want to have access to, want to find a new route to. In Portugal, well, they're the first ones to do so. All right, Vasco da Gama, again, make sure you guys remember it, that he is the first one here to round Africa, right? Make it up the eastern coast and make his way to India, establishing that trade route, right? And finding a new path to Asia. All right, we're good there. All right, so here's a good look at it. So like I mentioned with Henry the Navigator, even though he didn't really explore, he was helping sponsor these voyages. He was helping when it came to understanding the instruments, the tools needed to locate yourself and understand mapping and to find how to travel, right? These far distances out in the open water. All right, so this is kind of the voyage sponsored by Prince Henry the Navigator right here. Not bad. You're making baby steps, right? And then Bartholomew Diaz making this trip, keeping it close to the line, right? Keeping it close to the coast and rounding the southern tip of Africa. So that was his success, Bartholomew Diaz. Then Vasco da Gama says, you know what? We're going to make it, right? We're going to do what we can. So it seems like he really jumps out here. He almost gets as close as possible to South America, which we'll talk about it with the line of demarcation, right? Portugal does have access here to parts of South America. All right, and we'll mention about this discovery and even this movement here and this somewhat colonization of South America. Right, Spain will definitely take the New World, which we'll talk about with that. But anyway, Vasco da Gama, there he is in green, right, making his way all the way to India, finding this new path. Ben, you good? Huh? I hope you're paying attention. All right, so here we go. Now we get Columbus. Sure. All right, we all know about Columbus, don't we? Okay. So with Christopher Columbus or Cristoforo Colombo. All right, he was Italian, right? He wasn't actually from Spain. So I'm sure you guys maybe knew that already. Wait a minute, Columbus Day, or indigenous people, right? That was not too long ago. So we almost had it. I like to hit those holidays, these different types of days here, right on the time we're talking about it. We're pretty close with this one. Anyway, we all know Christopher Columbus. You guys know the rhyme here for when he set sail. We know it. Jason? 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean. There you go. Good job. So 1492. So as you can see, this is right around when Portugal is making their discoveries around Africa and finding their trade route to India. So Spain, obviously right next to Portugal, they're seeing the success, right? They are seeing these trade routes here being established to India, and Portugal is making a lot of prosperity off a lot of wealth. And with wealth comes power, right? Yeah. So Spain, right next to it, says, well, geez, we should find a new route too, right? Has anybody tried to sail west? Has anybody tried to do that? So I'm sure you guys hear the myth, right, of how Columbus thought, and many of these explorers, if you sail west, you're just going to fall off the edge of the world. That's not true, right? They knew that wasn't going to happen. But they did think that they did think that the Asian islands here were a little bit closer than what they thought, right? The North American continent, South American continent, right? They thought that wasn't there, right? I know, looking back at it now with the Vikings, they discovered Newfoundland, they discovered many of these areas here, right? In parts of Canada and even the Northeast United States. I'm just gonna stand up here, I guess, so you pay attention. So anyway, with Columbus, this Italian navigator, he is sponsored by Spain to make this trip and try to find this new route. You got it, west across the Atlantic. Anyway, Columbus's first voyage, real quick, his ships. Anybody know his ships? Dewey, Boston, do not say the Mayflower. All around. Anyway, what his ships? Anybody? Jason? Oh, okay. Good. All right. Good job. What's the other one? Yeah.
Is the Mayflower not one?
No, don't say that. I just said what I do to Austin. I'm just joking. Mayflower and the Pilgrims here. We'll talk about them when we get into it. All right, we'll talk a little bit about that later. Wait, Calvin? Is that a hand? I can't hear you. Maybe go ahead. What is it? Huh? Yeah, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. Just want to write that down. Maybe an extra credit point. You should maybe know that one now already. You guys learn about these sports already? No? No? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we did, I just don't.
All right.
We did it.
Thought you should have. All right, anyway, the Nina, the Quinta, and the Santa Maria, there you go. Anyways, they're all lost at sea, there's no idea of really where they're at. Some say the Santa Maria was taken apart, to help create this new colony in the Bahamas and Caribbean islands. Don't know, there's no real evidence of it. They're just kind of lost in history, which is unfortunate. But anyway, with Columbus, he set sail. Right, he makes 4 different trips to the New World. Obviously, as he sets sail across the Atlantic Ocean, you can imagine just how daring this is, and what kind of risk this is. This crew member, these people across the Atlantic Ocean. It's unimaginable, actually. It's like you don't really know what you're going to run into, right? The edge of the world, flat Earth. Is any flat Earthers in here? No, Jason, I thought you'd raise your hand. I thought you'd think it's funny. Anyway, there's no flat Earthers. Again, that's just kind of a myth. Again, where people say you're just going to fall off the edge of the earth. No, they didn't think that. Anyway, with the astrolabe, the caravel, right, and obviously these Dexmen, they're using these instruments to travel these far distances. Again, they thought that they were going to stumble across these Asian islands, these Indian islands, but in this case, they didn't. Right, they actually land right around the Bahamas. Right, they land in the Caribbean islands. As they do that, Hispaniola, right? As they do that, he encounters the Native Americans that are there and says, "Oh, these Indians here, right?" And obviously, he was totally wrong. Right? He was wrong. And he actually believes that he was on the outer rim of these Asian continent, right? He thought he was at the furthest islands that are from Asia. Even he goes to his death with that. Anyway, he reports back to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain and says, "Listen, there is so many resources out here. You should see the crops. You should see the food. It's larger than life. It's unbelievable. It's unimaginable." And that's kind of how he gets the A-OK to set out for more of these voyages. Anyway, we all know, obviously, with Columbus, as he makes his way to the New World and he encounters the Native Americans, he realizes quick, well, a lot of them are just falling dead, right? And the reason for it is because the immune systems of the Native Americans weren't, I guess you'd say, immune to these diseases, these sicknesses that, well, Europeans brought over. So smallpox especially, it's going to just wipe out over 90% of the Native American population through this age of exploration. So yeah, we'll talk about these conquistadors here soon. We'll mention about how these explorers were brutal and killed many of these Native Americans for their goods, for their resources, in search for gold, yeah. But a lot of them actually were wiped out by sickness, by disease. So the Native Americans, as they encounter these Spaniards, as they encounter these Europeans, they think almost like they're angels in a way, almost like gods at first, and then yeah, death follows. But as they see these ships coming, they see this huge, massive cross, right? Obviously crucifix on the sails, and they're in amazement by it. Again, when it comes to the talks and discussions of when their gods would come back, there's a lot of stories of different types of Native American ideas of where these gods would come from, and they would come across the water. And it just so happens here comes Columbus, right? So this is this god. No, he's not, right? And again, a lot of death falls through, but many of these Native Americans believe that these Europeans were gods because they thought that they would come across the water, they come across the ocean like these Europeans did. So at first they did treat them very well. The Native Americans decided, you know what, we can do something here, give them the goods they need and try to keep them around. And let's face it, they see their armor, right? And what is it doing? It's shining off the sun, right? So they think with the sparkle, they think with the shining of their different types of armor and different types of metal that they're bringing over, they are gods in all reality. So yeah, Columbus, well, I usually do this discussion where we have a debate whether or not we should call it Columbus Day or Indigenous People Day. Again, he was brutal, raped a lot of the Native Americans, killed many of them as well, and obviously finding a new world. So we know, yeah, he didn't actually make the discovery. The Vikings were here, and many other groups even, right? As we look back at different types of archaeological finds, but at the same time, right, for the modern age, well, this discovery is showing that there is a new continent out there. There is. That's as far as we got. Okay, anyway, I did talk about this already with our slide. So we're good. We're good. All right. Anyway, Columbus, there he is. Again, guys, make sure you guys look at the assignment, make sure you reply who you want to research and who you're working with in the discussion post. Right, I'm gonna check that. Hopefully you guys get that in, all right, sooner than later. All right.